In this episode, Jonathan and Jen are joined by Anders Rasmussen from Configit, a software provider who specializes in CLM, known as Configuration Lifecycle Management. This first part of the conversation focuses on what is CLM, what it's not, and defines the terminology around CLM, which has many interpretations in the market today. He lays a clear foundation of how it all comes together with layers of features, products, rules, and more. Join Jonathan, Jen, and Anders and get a comprehensive primer on what is configuration lifecycle management. Let's listen in. Welcome, everybody, back to Stay Sharp, the podcast about all things digital related to products and manufacturing. Today, we are talking about configuration and why it's important. I know how we got started on this is that the world is becoming more complex. Products are becoming more complex. Actually, buyers are becoming more complex. Their expectations are much higher, and they expect to be able to get exactly what they want. Technology, luckily for buyers, is driving that, making that possible. Matter of fact, when I was at HP, the concept of mass customization in the context of what additive manufacturing made possible was a very big focus.
And Jen, I want to jump in there and just say, by mass customization, is that's still the right buzzword? Because I think the topic we're talking about today is a good one, and I think it probably is. But just to sort of center in on what we're getting at today is about having a family of products where the customer has choices. Right, everybody can get just what they want. That customization for the masses. If you want red or blue, or you want plastic or metal, or you want the basic version or the deluxe version, that kind of thing, right? So that's where we're going today.
I agree, and to help us to take us there, basically, we have a special guest, Anders. Anders is the senior principal software developer at Configit, a company whose very business is centered on helping manufacturing companies master the challenges of configuration. Anders, can you please tell our guests a little bit about yourself and your work at Configit?
Sure, yeah. My name is Anders Rasmussen, and as you just mentioned, Jen, I work for Configit. We are a company who focus solely on delivering software and tools for companies that has complex configurable products. So basically, companies who allows their products to be mass customized. So I've been working pretty much my whole career actually with configurable products and software to handle those configuration challenges. My main focus is on the engineering space, because many people think that when you think about mass customization and configuration, it's all about how products are sold. But I think we'll get into some of those topics today, that configuration is actually a much, much broader picture, and getting to mass customization involves not just the sales department, it actually involves all the disciplines. So one of those disciplines, of course, that's the engineering discipline. And I think there's a lot of interesting challenges there. So I've been involved with a lot of our customers, large-scale customers, and I take special interest in talking to some of the engineering challenges that are there. So I hope we get to talk a little bit about that today as well. How is the whole picture when you go from not just selling your products, but when you design your products, you engineer your products, you sell it, manufacture it, etc. So basically, Configit, we're a company. We help customers not just to sell complex products for mass customization, but we help companies to get configuration knowledge aligned across all the different disciplines that is involved in designing, manufacturing, engineering, supporting products, etc.
I think that's a very good point, because it can't just be about selling customized products. You have to actually create them to be able to be sold. So we're going to change things up a little bit every time. It seems like every time we start our discussions, we start with the what. And this time, I think we wanted to just dig in with why is configuration an important thing? What kind of things does it enable? What are some of the challenges that it addresses?
Yeah, there's a number of challenges, but I think if you look at products today, the fact is that most products are complex, especially when you're dealing with industrial components. Products are very complex, and humans are just not capable of always handling that complexity. So the motivation behind mass customization, of course, is to let people choose whatever it is they want, come with their requirements, and then they have the products meet those requirements. So if you take even standard products that can be very complex and add that layer on top of it, you add an enormous amount of things you have to keep track of. So configuration is really about the ability not just to be able to let people choose what they want and express the requirements, but it's the whole chain of getting your product knowledge together. So you know what it is you can design, you can improve your design processes, you can bring it over to the sales channel when they're selling it, and you can control that when you're actually manufacturing your products. So the motivation behind configuration is basically, I would say it's twofold. One of them, of course, is if you have some very interesting products, you want to make sure that you can offer that to your customers. It's about making money, right? At the end of the day, everything you do as a company
is about making money.
Right? Yeah. So if you look at it from the outside, if you have interesting products, if you have know-how, you want to bring that out to your customers. And one way of doing that is to get control of how you can customize your product. At the end of the day, that process is called configuration. So that's step one. But step two is also you want to save money, right? You want to optimize your processes.
Right.
You want to make sure that if you offer something when you sell things, then you can actually design it. You can also manufacture it, and later on you might have to service it. So you also have to put configuration into that chain of thought, right? You have to think about what goes into the product from the early phase. And that's basically at the end of the day what you're trying to achieve. You want to get your knowledge out there, make some more money, sell some more things, and make sure you can optimize your processes and support your products all the way through. So I think there's a lot of motivation at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's funny, Anders. It reminds me of an analogy I was thinking of coming into our session today. Everybody wants it their way, right? That's mass customization. That's the idea. But this isn't just in products, right? I was thinking about the analogy of a restaurant, right? I mean, everybody goes to a restaurant and you want your meal the way that you want your meal. But, the server, the waiter, the waitress has to think carefully about, well, what can we and can't we do? And they need to be in communication with the kitchen. What ingredients do we have and not have? It's the same concept. It's just, how do you do it efficiently? How do you do it well? And you can think of the times you've been to a restaurant or anywhere, anything that serves you, where if everybody's in lockstep and understands the capabilities, what they can offer, how they can do it, what they're good at, what they're not good at, you have a good experience. And it seems like that's the area we're talking about, right?
That's the area.
Configuration is about how do you do that well?
Yes.
It's a great analogy too, because think of...
Yeah, go. I was just saying, when we think
that
products
happens
here,
too.
Right? Yeah, it's not just what you deliver. I mean, if you're doing physical products, it's not just, here you go, here's a piece of hardware, and that's my product. The product is the whole process. It's also when you buy it, you want quick feedback, right? You want a dialogue with the company manufacturing or delivering your product about what kind of things they can do for you. Once it's delivered, you want all the documentation, the support. You want to make sure the transportation of it is done correctly. There's so much more. It's a whole palette about products. It's not just a physical thing that you choose when you buy. So I think you're onto something there, Jonathan, that it's the whole experience that we're looking at here.
Well, and one of the things that we had talked about in an earlier conversation was giving, even internally at a company, giving them your entire company common language to use to communicate back and forth between the engineers and the salespeople, and all the way down, the engineers, manufacturing, et cetera. Like, okay, I can design it this way. Yet the manufacturing coming back, go, yeah, that's not a good idea. We can't. You can design it that way. We can't manufacture it that way. And the salespeople, well, we could sell it this way. Yep, we can't design it that way. So, giving them a common language to talk to one another about how to create a customized product.
Speaking of common language, I'm going to jump in there and say, as we get going, we're talking a little bit about the why, and this is good. But we use the word configuration, and we have to be careful. I think,
yes.
Anyway,
in the engineering space,
right?
Yes.
And I'll say just specifically with some of the customers and vendors we work with. So we're not talking about configuration like SolidWorks configuration. That's a specific functional thing inside that software. We're not talking about configuration management or CM, although it relates to this, but the word configuration, we're talking about a different meaning of it when we talk about it here. I don't know what other connotations it might have, but I think it's good to get that on the table because language really is important here. Words matter about what we're talking about. And, I'll sort of leave it there and say, okay, Anders, what else is important to know about, what is configuration, the topic, key terms, anything else that we need to touch on there before we get going?
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, terminology is very important because a lot of engineers, when I talk to them, when I mention the word configuration, we're not talking about the same thing. We use the same terminology, but it's a completely different things. So in I think today's talk, when we say configuration, we're talking about a definition of a product from an abstract perspective. So let's start with what we're not talking about. We're not talking about version management that goes into a system, revisioning, or setup of things. So we're talking about, when I say configuration, we're actually talking about an abstract specification of a product. So another way of looking at it is it's almost an expression of requirements to the product. This is what I want. This is my product as I look upon it. If you're looking upon it from a customer's point of view, the configuration there would contain all the things that the customer wants the product to do, the functions and features. But the configuration, I think, is a little wider. I think we'll get into that later, because the configuration for a product as it's sold also touches all the way down to how it's designed and some of the things that influences what it can do from a technical perspective. And if you go a little bit right in the you can say the life cycle of the product, it will also involve information about how it's to be manufactured, etc. But basically, when and
that's where it does connect, right? That's where the configuration ties into the configuration management. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Because that's also, we have to think about when does a configuration live? One of the things that we do in Configit is we talk about when people say configuration and the configuration process. As I tried to mention before, it's not just about selling it. That's where you usually see configurators. But what we do and what we focus a lot on in our company is to help people on the journey towards what's called configuration lifecycle management. And it's taking configuration process and the configurations, the definitions of products as they're sold, into a broader picture. And this picture is about the lifecycle that goes all the way through when you start designing the product. When you sell the product, that's when your specification of what it can do turns into an instance. And then that instance, the configuration, what requirements we're actually satisfying for the customer, or the description of the product they buy, lives on as it goes down the manufacturing line on the shop floor and so forth when it's serviced later. So it's a very broad picture. Its configuration is from someone who sells configuration, I would say it's everywhere, right? But
right.
But that's a great thing, but it's also a challenge, right? And I think that's one of the interesting things to talk about today. That since it is everywhere, we are really talking about a lot of knowledge across a lot of disciplines and across a lot of different points in time for a product, and all that knowledge somehow needs to be combined. Otherwise, we lose information from one discipline to another.
I think that's a great point, Anders, that we should look at it across the life cycle. Not everyone does, and that's one of the challenges, right? Yes. But it's important to note that the configuration of the product lives on through all the stages of its life, and we have to pay attention to it there.
Yes.
And coming back to that topic of language for a minute, I want to throw a few terms out there that I hear a lot in this space when we're talking about this topic. And make sure that the audience is kind of with us on what some of these mean, or maybe you can even correct me, if we're talking about the right terms. But I hear things like features and options describing, what the idea is of the product, what it's going to do or can do, that kind of thing. I hear people talking about dictionaries of features and options, and then also configuration rules, what's allowable and not allowable, those kinds of things. And then the resulting technical details. And this is where I start to run out of the correct language also. But is there some of that you can kind of take us through just to give us the right language?
Yeah. So first off, I would love to say here is the right language, but I think it's important to say that this is actually something the whole industry struggles with, because the language differs a lot, not just cross disciplines, right? This is how engineers talk, this is how salespeople talk, etc. But it also differs within different systems. So if you go to engineering and, for instance, look at PDM or PLM systems, every vendor will have their own way of expressing the same thing. So maybe we should talk about the concepts, and then we can try to put some terminology on it. Really. So unfortunately, I cannot give you the right language or the right terms, but we can definitely define the concepts, and then we can maybe touch upon what different companies and different disciplines would usually call these things.
Sure.
So let's try
even doing that.
Yeah.
Even doing that is helpful, right? Knowing that the language does change customer to customer, vendor to vendor, industry, that's helpful, right? So thank you for help us level set on the concepts at least.
Yeah. So it's one of the things that makes this hard is that when people just write a document and say, what are your features? What are your parts? What are your configurations? Sometimes they mean something very different. But let's try to start with some of the basic concepts, right? If we want to do, when I say do configuration, I'm usually thinking of the process of configuring a product. And that means interacting with a system in order to express my requirements or my needs, and then have a piece of software, we call that a configurator, give me back the choices that are compatible with what I've entered into the system. So I think most people would say that's the process of creating what we just defined as a configuration, a definition of product. That is a configuration process. So in order to communicate with someone and in order to communicate with the system, you need a language, right? And this is where there's some of the things you just mentioned: features, options, variables, their characteristics, depending on which system and what background you come from. But the language you communicate with and the language we use when we express capabilities of products from an abstract perspective. We're not talking about parts here. That's very important. If you have a configurable product, a complex product, and we want to define the capabilities of that product, we use, some people will call it features. So let's stick with that terminology today.
Okay.
So a feature of the product could be something that, for instance, describe the size of the product, or the color of the product, or the material it's made of, or other capabilities. What's the throughput? If I'm trying to define a pump, for instance, some of my features would describe the type of liquid it can pump, the height it can pump, the volume it can pump. Maybe does it handle hot fluids, acidic fluids, things like that. That would be the features of the product. And that interaction, that language, is actually the first step we have to establish when we talk about configurable products and defining configurable products. So when I say language, I mean we need to define those codes that we can use in order to describe what are the features and functions of my product. So I think that's.
So I'm going to count the score is 1 for me, though. I used one word right. I did say features. So
you did, and I think most people understand that. But I've heard a lot of different variations of that. I would even say when you say feature, that also has 2 meanings. We can use them interchangeable for today's talk. But if you look at a color of a product, the feature could be color, or it could be red, which is a value of color. Right. So today, I think let's just use it's a little overloaded, but let's just use the word feature to describe, the color and the value all together, right? So that's the foundational part, and it sounds simple, right? I mean, getting to you mentioned feature catalog or dictionaries. It sounds quite simple to create a catalog or a listing or a dictionary of these features. Because at the end of the day, they have a code and they have a description. What we figure out is that if you look at real-world examples, that first step actually comes with a lot of effort, because you have to create a language, a feature language, a dictionary that you can agree upon, both when you sell the products. For instance, on a global website, you will let the customer choose some features to say, I want this red pump with this flow, etc. Those features has to be understood in the engineering department, because they might know if you have this elevation on your fluids and this flow, then there are certain aspects that you don't tell your customers about, but there are certain aspects in the design that has to be set. And when you manufacture,
we all know there's never any disagreements. I was going to say there's never any disagreements between engineering and salespeople.
No, never. How could that happen?
Everybody's completely on the same page from the start and all throughout, entirely.
All throughout. And that's what makes configuration simple. Yes. No, but it's really, it's just when you describe it, so easy to understand that, of course, you need some codes with a description. But it can be so complex to establish that catalog. But let's assume we do that. Let's assume we have this catalog and we have some codes for these features and we have some descriptions and everyone agrees on how these descriptions are to be interpreted. The next thing you need is you need some rules. So the rules really, they are the ones that determine which features goes together. And they actually come in many different shapes and from many different sources. So if we start with the sales aspect, the salespeople, they're interested in figuring out how they want to position the products on the markets, right? So they might actually say, if I'm selling passenger vehicles, if I'm selling to the Scandinavian markets, I always want to have a winter pack included because it might be pretty cold there. But if I'm selling my vehicle on the African market, I wouldn't sell it without an air condition, right? In both cases, both cars, they're legal, right? They will pass legal requirements, and then yes, you can sit in there and you can drive, but you can be pretty sure that customers would be unhappy unless they don't get what they want, right? So the salespeople, they would have one set of rules, which is really about how they position the different products on the different markets, what they want to offer. They also know that in certain markets, there's just no revenue to be made on certain products, so they might actually exclude them. Or in certain markets, there's, if you sell something, you always want to have something else because that's a great upsell and everyone accepts that in that market, etc.
Right. Or I don't want to offer this or that to a certain customer, or any number of, like you said, sales rules.
Sales rules, yeah. So they don't really define, what is possible. They define what you want to offer and how you want to bring it out. The engineers, on the other hand, usually they don't care too much about how it's sold, right? They care about how it's designed.
Might account for some of the disagreements, but okay.
Yeah, it might be. So it's they have a different focus, right? So their job is to create great designs and come up with new capabilities and make sure that if certain requirements comes in, and when I say requirements, let's think of that as a configuration. When a configuration comes in from, for instance, a sales configurator, that it can be built, right? It can be designed. So there's a lot of things that would clash in a design, and engineers know that. So that brings us back to this language we have. What you really want to create in the feature language. You want to create a language which is rich enough to express both the technical aspects from an engineering point of view and a commercial aspect from the sales point of view. And as we move on, manufacturing point of view, service and setup, decommissioning, etc. Right. So that's one of the reasons why this language that goes across all the disciplines is so hard to do, because when you engineer, you certainly have aspects of your product you will never expose to sales, and sales will not expose to manufacturing. But there is an overlap, right? We know that, and that overlap, you have to be darn sure that that's where you agree. And sometimes when you sell it, you don't differentiate between different things, right? You might not care if your product is in category A, category B, or category C. But from an engineering perspective, it could be the category A really breaks down to a lot of subcategories. And that's where this language becomes interesting. So when we talk about configuration lifecycle management and bringing configuration together across the different disciplines, we're really talking about making sure that your products, from a configuration perspective, is understood across those disciplines. And the first step in that is to establish this feature language. So that was kind of the foundation of configuration.
Yeah.
I think we can say, right? The language, and then the ability to have all the different disciplines put their knowledge in, you can talk of that as being like a product specification, right? So there's a specification, which is the technical specification, the commercial specification, the manufacturing specification, etc. And at the end of the day, if you want to break down the barriers between these different disciplines, what you have to make sure is that all those specifications goes together. And that is really you can say that's the crux of configuration lifecycle management. It's the ability to have a language that enables people to talk together and then bring all the knowledge into one big pot. So now you have a unified place where everyone can go and say, what is my combined knowledge of my products? So we can actually drive our configurators. So that's
interesting, Anders. So, I was getting ready to ask, to help us differentiate between a topic we talk about a lot on this podcast, product lifecycle management and PLM, and the term you're using, configuration lifecycle management, CLM, right? And I feel like I'm starting to get the connection, right? The piece that says, well, the concept of a configuration of a product, seeing it across that full life and across all those functions of your business, it seems like it. What else would you say about helping us understand either that difference or how these should fit, or help put PLM and CLM together for us?
Yeah. So a lot of people have been asking, so are you trying to replace my PLM system? I mean, if you have something called CLM software, are you replacing my PLM system? And the answer is absolutely no. So CLM is an addition on top of your PLM system. Your PLM system primarily keeps track of a lot of your design and engineering aspects. But what we realized talking to our customers is that it's very hard to get your data out of the PLM system and get it aligned with the rest of the organization. So I've even heard customers say, what we do, we take the things out of the PLM system and throw it over the fence and hopes the guys on the other side catches it. And we know that's the challenge. So there's a lot of great PLM systems out there who actually handles configuration, right? So they have this language we talk about. They have the capability to express features, put codes on it. They even have the capability to express rules and run a configurator on that rule, so you can allow features to be selected. One thing you typically do in PLM systems as well, we can get back to that a little later, but that's to connect the outcome of that process up to bill of materials. So they also go an extra step and make the bill of materials configurable. Basically, in short terms, it just means that the bill of material can react to your configuration. So if you have a configuration, script, and product, you get the specific bill of material that fits that specification. So PLM is an absolutely essential tool for the engineering space, and you have a lot of things in there. Usually, people also have some PDM tools, your bill of materials, and you have a lot of documents that you want to revision, change management, etc. The idea about CLM is to say that is one source of truth. It's the technical source of the design source of truth. But you can go other places in the organization, and you can probably find similar knowledge, but that has a completely different view. So if you open up your CRM system or dealer management system, they will have another product specification that talks about how to position the products. They would also have rules. They might even have different types of sales BOM to create reports. But that's the situation in most companies. We have all these wonderful systems that does a great job handling product definitions, even configurable products, but they're not connected. And I think that's really the if you have to say it in very few words, what CLM is all about. It's connecting all those systems that each holds the product definition just from different points of view at a product lifecycle. So
that makes perfect sense, Anders, because that's exactly what I see with a lot of customers that we work with who do this type of work in engineering and in manufacturing on the technical side, right? Yeah. And I see a lot of vendors, well, I'll throw another word out there, they'll call it variant management, right? Yes. They may not even be necessarily using a configurator, but the idea is they have a product line, product family with variants to it, and they share things in common, et cetera. But I see exactly what you're talking about, which is it's a very engineering and technical focus, right? Yes. Can I take this concept of my features and feature values or options or whatever it might be, and express a bill of material, maybe an engineering bill of material. Maybe in some cases, it starts to get closer to the vision you're painting for us of, well, maybe I could use those same features to express a manufacturing bill of material or a process plan or something downstream. And they start to connect a couple of things. I will say a lot of them, I still see the challenge that if you start technically to move upstream to sales, a lot of them, it's still a throw it over the wall piece, like you said.
Yes.
Yeah, we have our engineering rules for how to configure the product, but sales does their own thing. And then we're disconnected, to your point.
Yes. But I think everything I just told you is for many, it's the vision, right? It's the end goal. It's the alignment of all your knowledge into one place. It's not an unrealistic vision, not at all, but it's a maturity process. So I think most companies today, even companies that offer customization, they're on a path towards what eventually is configuration lifecycle management, consolidating all that knowledge you have, but they might start in different places. So it's not uncommon to see that we have engineering with some configuration capabilities, and then you have a completely detached configurator that's built by sales, and manufacturing, well, they rely on getting a bill of material from the engineering department. Someone will transform it and make the bill of material and make it into a manufacturing BOM. So it's a process, right? We also see companies who basically what they do is they have bill of materials and designs in the PDM system, and every time they get someone creates a quote for a customer or new requirements come in, they would have to open their system and basically engineer. They will clone and own, as some call it, take an existing architecture and an existing design, they search, find the one that fits the best, modify it, see if it can do what the customer wants to do, simulate it, calculate it, and then come back and say, yep, we can do that, and this is the cost price, and someone will add a markup and you will offer it to the customers. So I think configuration can come in many different places, and not everyone will start in engineering or start in sales or start in manufacturing. But I think at the end of the day, if you are dealing with such complex products and really want to offer mass customization, we go back to where we started, right? You do that to make more money because you want to sell your products, but you also want to save money, and that's the motivation basically for getting configuration knowledge in all the different disciplines and getting that aligned, because it enables you to do more, it enables you to do it more efficient, and you can start to do some very interesting things when you have a combined pool of information that tells you, what can I do with my product from all perspectives.
That's perfect, Anders, because you brought up a concept and you didn't say it explicitly. Maybe it's because it's a bad word, I don't know, but that idea of the clone and own and engineer to order. So many companies today that may resonate with our concept of mass customization, and we talk about configuration, that's the mode they're in, which is every time a customer wants something, it's, okay, I can make you just what you want, and I'll go engineer it, and then I can tell you the cost, therefore the price and the delivery time and all those things that lets them provide the customer exactly what they want. So in the end, it's still serving the customer need the same way we talked about when I want mine just my way. I want my plate in the restaurant just my way. But it's a different process, but it still relates back to configuration. And this is, maybe we may not have time to get into it today. Maybe we should continue the conversation later. But that idea of ETO, engineer to order, and CTO, configure to order, and who wants to be where, and what are the benefits of each, and can you leverage one for the other, and all of that seems interesting in this space too. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think, to be fair, it's not a black and white space that you're either in complete ETO or complete CTO. I think there's a lot of points in between. One thing we haven't talked about is when does the configuration happen, right? Because it doesn't always happen at point of sale. Sometimes if you're doing business to business, you're configuring your products and going through a process that might be engineering related, and you make a lot of the word variants you came back to, but a lot of products that are a little similar, but not quite. And then when you finally sell it to the end customer, they basically pick from a catalog with predefined product numbers. But even in that context, you might have configuration that helps you create all these product definitions that you put to market. So I think there's a scale, and it also depends on your type of product, because some products lend themselves easier to this automated process. So when I say configure to order and I talk about the ideal world, you can imagine what would happen, right? If you have the ideal world and everything is aligned, what you can do is you can offer all your capabilities at point of sale. The customer can configure using an interactive configurator and be guided by a salesperson. That's ideally a quick process if you have all the knowledge at hand. And then because you are aligned with engineering and manufacturing, you know that what you get and what you promise the customer is feasible. The whole process could be automated. You send the order down, your sales features will expand into technical features and manufacturing features. You can create your bill of materials. You can automatically find out what your prices should be, and everything rolls down the production line. It sounds great, right? But it's not completely impossible, because, I mean, if you look at the automotive industry, that's basically how it works. You go down and you buy a car. And when you buy a car, some people buy it from the lot, but especially if you go to a European dealer, you actually configure your car. And as you're configuring it, you have a lot of options to choose from. Some brands have more options than others. And as you're choosing, you can even get feedback. Oh, by the way, if you choose this model with that engine, we can even go down the production line and figure out what slot you have, so they can give you, say, well, that thing here, we can deliver in a month, because they're already allocated a slot on the manufacturing line for that. You take something else, we can still do it. We know we can do it because things are aligned. It might be manufactured a bit later, but we can automatically calculate the price for you. And they have a good idea that, this sales configuration becomes, we can create a bill of material for it, and it will transform to a manufacturing bill of material, and there's not too many misbills, right? That it will go down the production line, you'll get up with the vehicle. But if you buy something else,
and that's the vision, right?
That's the vision, yes. So it's not fantasy, right? But it's where a lot of companies would go. Of course, there are cases where if we stay with the automotive industry, like when I say automotive, it's anything with wheels on it. But if you're buying a bus, those are highly configurable, and they don't always fit into a configurator, because the alignment of the seats and everything else, that's really complex, right? So there you would probably be in the grayscale. You would configure as far as you can, like the length and the engine and things like that, because you have to drive in environmental zones and things like that. And then the other parts, maybe the interior, you would do engineer to order on that one. But it doesn't mean that you have to do engineer to order on the whole thing. So I think it's a floating scale.
It's a great example you just brought up, Anders. That's a project I was involved with a couple of years ago, in fact, about buses exactly. And that's very much a challenge, right? Is it all CTO? Is it don't want it to be all ETO, but there's some pieces of each. So we should leave that one there, because we could get deeper.
And I'm gonna have to cut you guys off here a little bit, because it's part of my job.
That never happens. That never happens, Jen. You never have to stop me in the middle of asking question after question after question.
No, but as we suspected, I think this is going to be a topic that spans more than one podcast for sure, because we've just barely scratched the surface here. So I think it's been a great early discussion about what configuration is, what it's not. I really want to get back to digging into a little bit more about how it compares to PLM, because it sounded like, yes, it is in addition to, but it sounded more than like a side addition or a layer on top. It sounded more almost like an integrative tissue sort of thing between a variety of systems. So I want to dig into that a little bit more, some of the external capabilities, et cetera. So,
and I've got questions, Jen.
Do you ever not have questions? I can't imagine your kids be like, "What, Dad? Stop!" Anyway, so Anders, if you would like to come back, we would certainly like to have you on a second podcast so we can dig into this subject just a little bit deeper, because it is fascinating, and I think it'll be really interesting to our listeners as well. So I want to thank you for joining us today, and Jonathan as well for co-hosting with me, for asking all of the questions. Like every once in a while, I'm like, never mind. I'll ask next time. And
thank you for doing that, Jen. Thank you for letting me ask all the questions and get my curiosity satisfied. And Anders, yes, thank you as well. This has been very, very helpful, very educational. We appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you.
So, Anders, if people want to get deeper into CLM and this topic, these sorts of ideas, I mean, what What would you point them to? What could they could look at, go to, read about, that sort of thing?
Yes, we actually have a very interesting event coming up, what we call the CLM Summit. So this is the 9th time. We do that as an annual event. It's an online event that will happen on the 15th to the 16th of May this year. So at that event, we'll have different people talking about what CLM is. There will be some companies presenting their journey on the CLM travel, from how they've started, what they've been working on, and some of the things that they've achieved in that. So if you're interested, definitely go and search for CLM Summit. You can find information on the Configit homepage, and there's also a sign-up sheet in there. So go ahead and have a look, and the agenda will be out soon, and it's a no-travel on-site thing.
Yeah, hopefully we can get that link maybe into the show notes or something. But that's good. Thank you for that idea where people can learn more.
Yeah.
And a matter of fact, to all of our listeners, if you have any questions that we didn't cover, like you would have wanted to ask, but Jonathan was talking, please reach out via social media, LinkedIn, etc., to ask the question, be part of the conversation. And until next time, stay sharp.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here and listening to this episode of Stay Sharp with Razorleaf. If you have any lingering questions from this podcast, we'd love to answer it for you. Just leave a comment on our post or send an email to podcast@razorleaf.com. We appreciate all the feedback we receive. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, stay sharp.